Oh, wow. Good morning. How y'all doing? Good to see y'all. Welcome. We never met. My name is Troy. I'm one of the pastors here, and grateful that you joined us this morning. I told the last service, it's just gorgeous outside. Someone counted it up, and they've said that's the 1,000,000th day in a row that we've had a perfect day here in Steamboat. Amen? So I like that. So anyway, but great to have you. Thanks for being here. You know, it's always fascinating to me the reach that this church has. People from all over the valley will come here. People drive from Craig. They're here this morning. People drove right in front of them from Kremlin, which just blows my mind. And so just grateful that you guys took the trip there. But today, someone's got you both beat out here. We've got two folks that came all the way from Uganda, Africa, to be here with us this morning. I want to introduce you to Pastor Moses. Is he in the back? There he is right there. This is Pastor Moses. Yeah. Amen. Welcome. Moses is the director, the national director for Generation U, which is the organization that we've partnered with here to bring clean water to folks in Africa. And he has come all the way from there to be here to share tonight at their event, and going to be telling some great stories of life change. And so glad to have you. Right next to him is Dennis, his friend. Dennis, welcome him. Dennis is a 19-year-old young man who has great dreams of playing Major League Baseball. He has played semi-pro. He's in Japan, and his dream is to be a catcher in the major leagues, and that would be a first for Uganda. And so he's come to share a little bit of his story as well. Welcome, Dennis. Glad to have you. Hope you guys, if you're interested, they still have a few tickets left for their event tonight, and so you can catch them in the foyer if you'd like to come and hear some inspiring stories and how you can maybe participate in bringing some help to some people who are in difficult circumstances. So today, this morning, we're starting a new series. It's called Miracles, as you saw, Miracles. And I just want to begin by asking you all a question, and you can answer in a moment by raising your hand if you'd like, but don't raise your hand or don't answer until I give you the cue, okay? Because what I want to do is I want to tease this out a little bit so that everybody kind of knows where we're going, all right? And so here's the question. Have you ever asked God, or if you don't necessarily believe in God, have you ever wished for or hoped for or looked for or felt like you needed a miracle? Don't answer. In about 15 seconds, I'll invite you to respond to that. But let's go back a few years. Maybe it was back when you were in high school. Maybe you remember in high school you were driving home one night and it's late and it's past your curfew. And as you're driving, you're having a little negotiation with God. You know what I'm talking about? You're like, God, please, I pray that my parents are asleep, right? But you know that they're not, because you know that they're just probably sitting there waiting for you. And so you're like, God, would you do a miracle for me? Would you make mom and dad just pass out right there in their chairs, and that way I can come in unnoticed, right? I mean, maybe you prayed a prayer like that when you were younger, or maybe your situation with your parents was different. Maybe it was a little more serious that you prayed. Maybe your parents got separated, and you prayed a prayer that, like, God, can you bring mom back home? Please bring dad back to our house. Something like that. Or maybe it was just something fun. Maybe it was prom, and you got the courage to ask this girl out, and you're like, well, God, please let her say yes. I know that she's way out of my league. I know that I shot for the fence here. But God, I will serve you forever if you would just get her to say yes. Amen. Some of you, he answered that. You're sitting next to her now, I'm sure. Or maybe it was in your 20s when you're a little bit older and you got out in the job market and you got interviewed for a job that you really wanted. It was kind of the thing that you were hoping for, and you're looking and you're like, God, man, I would really like to have this job. I know that there are people that are more qualified and experienced than I am, but man, please, would you give me this job? Or could be a financial miracle that you were needed. Maybe you remember a time in your life where things were tight and the wolves were at the door, and your situation was desperate, and you needed God to show up, and he needed to show up yesterday. And so you prayed and asked for a miracle perhaps, or maybe you just wanted to have a baby. This happens, and you were told that that's not possible for you, that couldn't happen. And you said, God, I know that you can do all things. Could you just give us a child. Or maybe it's recent. Maybe you're waiting on a diagnosis. Perhaps you're waiting for, you've had some tests and you're waiting to hear back, and you're praying that they're going to be negative. I talked to a lady last night. She's praying that it'd be negative, and you've done that. Or maybe it's not about you. Maybe you're praying for someone else. There's someone in your family that's in trouble, maybe a son or a daughter or a brother or sister, or perhaps maybe one of your parents is ill or your grandparent is in the hospital, and you're just like, here's the thing. All I'm saying is that if at any point in your life, even if it was back when you had you were more of a believer than you are now, even if it was way back then, if you have ever asked God for a miracle, or you just hoped for a miracle, even if you weren't sure that there was a miracle worker, if you've ever done that, would you be so bold to just raise your hand and admit that? Put them up high. Look, wow, me too. Look around. All the way. It's fascinating. Thank you. That is something that we all have in common, regardless of our background, our faith background. We all kind of have hoped and wanted a miracle, and that's amazing. But here's something else that we have in common. I don't want to tell you, but you know it. That is that most of us, or many of us, did not get the miracle that we hoped for. That's the reality. That we were hoping and we didn't get it. Now, let's be honest, in some cases, that was probably a good thing. It's probably for the best. In fact, you know that one of the best gifts God gives us is unanswered prayers, right? And after some time has went by, you look back and you're like, ooh, yeah, glad you ignored that prayer, God, because what I got now is so much better, or who I got now is so much better than what I was thinking. Amen? Right? So maybe it was that. But let's be honest. For many of us, not getting our miracle was devastating. It was heartbreaking and it was devastating, because here's why. We couldn't figure out why. Why not? God, I mean, seriously, God, if you did this for them, I've heard, why didn't you do it for me? Or God, if you did it back then, or if you did it in the Bible, why wouldn't you do it for me? I wasn't asking you to part the Red Sea or anything like that. I just needed this small thing. I just needed you to do this thing. She just needed this. My dad just needed you to come through in this way. And it didn't happen. And for many of us, not getting your miracle was devastating to your faith. It really shook your faith. And maybe somehow, some way you've clawed your way out of that and you eventually got back to some sort of faith again, but perhaps you didn't. Perhaps, your faith didn't survive your disappointment with God back then, and it's kind of caused you to now live your life without God now. You're like, we all know people that have kind of got a cold war going on between them and God because grandma didn't make it or something like that, And so I get it. And so maybe you're bugged out by that. And maybe religious people bother you. Maybe people like me get on your nerves. I mean, maybe you're here. This is not your choice. You're only here because someone invited you to come, or you're staying with your friends. You're visiting out of town, and they're like, "We go to church on Sunday morning," and you do too. And so here you are, but you don't want to be. Because this whole thing gets on your nerves. People like me get on your nerves. Because here's why. You know better. You did everything right back then. You prayed all the right words and you prayed with the right motives. And God did not come through for you. And so you walk in here and you look at all of us and you're like, you're all just naive to think these ways. And I get it. I don't blame you. Or maybe it's the opposite for you, though. Maybe there's something about you or in you that kind of envies people of faith. I mean, maybe you look at us and you're like, man, I used to believe when I was 8 or 10, when I was 15, I used to believe, but I don't believe anymore. And I kind of miss that feeling. I kind of miss that hope that I had. In fact, every once in a while, if truth be told, you catch yourself praying. You're like, what am I doing? I don't believe that anymore. But you want to. You want to, but you just can't get there. Listen, if any of that resonates with you, if you've kind of understand and empathize with some of that and feel it a little bit, this series is going to be for you. This is going to encourage you, because what we're going to do over the next couple of weeks is we're going to have an adult conversation about miracles. We're going to talk about it. I mean, miracles are something that we believed in as children. We were just believed in magic and all that, and over time, less and less. And so we're going to have an adult conversation about miracles. And what I want to do today is I want to start by looking at what a miracle really is. What is a miracle? And I just want to warn you today, this is going to feel a little bit more like a college class than church to you, because when we start a new series, I sometimes don't get a chance to use a lot of scriptures because I'm introducing a new topic. I'm trying to set the table for all of us and get us on the same page. And so if you like scriptures, hey, come back next week. I'm going to have plenty of them. We're going to really dig in. But today what I want to do is just kind of get us all on the same page because this is such an important topic. It's such maybe a vital topic for some of us. And so what I want to do is I want to start by answering a couple questions as it relates to miracles, so that when I say miracle, quote unquote, we're all kind of thinking the same thing. And so the first question I want to look at is what makes a miracle a miracle? Okay, what makes a miracle a miracle? And then what I want to do is I want to talk about the relationship between Christianity and miracles. Do you have to believe in miracles to be a Christian? Or maybe do you have to believe in all those miracles that are in the Bible to be a Christian? Is that necessary? Because you wrestle with some of those. And in fact, let's start right there. Do you have to believe in miracles to be a Christian? That's a great question. And the answer is yes. But you only have to believe in two. Now, you can believe in more, and many of you do. But really, technically, you only have to really believe in two miracles. And the interesting thing about those two miracles is that most of us, in fact, most people in the world already believe in one. So you're already halfway there. And if you can get to the place where you accept the second miracle, that will actually open the door for making all the other miracles a little more acceptable to you intellectually. You'll be able to go, okay, I think I can work through those, right? So, if you're here this morning and you're not a believer, you're not a Christian, or you used to be a Christian and you're not really now and you're kind of checking this out, I just really encourage you, hang with me, because we're going somewhere that might be helpful. But the thing I want to do first is that we got to talk about miracles. What makes a miracle a miracle? Okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to first give you the textbook definition of a miracle so we can know technically what is a miracle. And this is going to sound very academic and very scholarly and all that because it does come from an actual textbook. This is studied in lots of seminaries across the nation. It's from a textbook called Miracles and Modern Thought by Dr. Norman Geisler. You don't need to memorize this, but this is what he said. Miracle, a divine intervention into or an interruption of the regular course of the world. In other words, the way the world actually works, okay? And so a miracle is a divine intervention into or an interruption of the way, the laws of nature that produces, get this, a purposeful. In other words, there's a specific purpose, but an unusual event that would not or could not occurred otherwise. Now, that's the textbook definition of miracle, but I thought maybe it would be better if I just gave you a simpler version, and we'll run with this one for the rest of this series. See if this fits. A miracle is a temporary suspension or reversal of the laws of nature. How's that sound? Okay? You're not talking to me. You're already zoned out because it's okay. I think it's a good, let me do it again. Miracle is simply the temporary suspension, temporary, it's not eternal, or reversal of the laws of nature. And when I say talk about the laws of nature, here's what we're talking about. We're talking about physics or chemistry or biology. We're talking about science. It's the temporary suspension of or the reversal of what we know, what makes the world work. Okay, what makes the world predictable to us. So a miracle is a temporary suspension or reversal of the laws of nature or of science as we know it. Now, we don't talk a lot about science in church, do you? You don't hear because why? There's this sense out there that those are not compatible. But let me tell you something interesting that you may not know, and you can check this out if you don't believe me. But here it is. Did you know that it was actually Christians who started the modern scientific movement? This is true. Copernicus, Francis Bacon, it was Christians. The modern scientific movement was started by Christians. And here's why. Because unlike ancient pagans, Christians believe in order. We believe that there is order in this world. Pagans that believed in the gods and all that, they believed that everything happened in the world that happened was just a random results of their gods fighting each other or, toying with humans, messing and manipulating human beings. That's what they believed. And their gods were fickle. You could never predict what they were going to do or why they would do it. It was just, you lived in a world of chaos. It was just like anything can happen at any time. And the idea to them that there were patterns, that there were laws that were observable and repeatable, which is, by the way, the modern scientific method, that it must be observable, we can observe it, and it's repeatable. That the idea of that there were such things like that was impossible because you never knew what your gods might do next. They were just crazy. They were weird. But then Christians came along, and they realized that there were patterns in this world and that we could predict the way this world works. They would say, listen, we believe that just one God created the heavens and the earth, and that there's order to this world. And whenever Christians discovered something scientifically, they would say, oh, that's how he did it. Or, oh, that's how he makes this, that's how he does it, right? And so Christians would say that science is simply humans discovering how God has put the world together, how God has pieced the world together. And so there is no conflict, contrary to popular opinion, there is no conflict between science and Christianity. You've heard that there's a debate between science and religion, and there is, because there's lots of religions, and they believe all kinds of things that have nothing to do with science. But there is no conflict, let me say this again, there's no conflict between science and Christianity. Science explains how God did it, and then Christians embrace that. But a miracle, now that is a little more. A miracle, remember, is an interruption into the way that God normally behaves or the way that God actually designed things to happen in our world. For example, if you went outside your house and a tree had gotten blown over and fell down and missed hitting your car by inches, I mean, it just landed just inches away from your car, that's amazing. But that's not necessarily a miracle. You might go, oh, it's a miracle. No, technically, no natural law was violated or suspended in order for that tree to not hit your car. It just fell. Gravity made it fall exactly where it did. Now, you may think that's a miracle, but it wasn't. Now, listen, on the other hand, if you did walk outside of your house and you saw a tree hovering over the top of your car, like totally hovering, like root ball and all, and it's just floating there, and you like walk up and you look at it, and then you get in your car real quick and you drive your car out from under it, and as soon as you pull out, the tree then crashes like a Bugs Bunny cartoon. If that happens, give me a call. Because that is a verified miracle. Why? Because it happened outside the laws of nature. And that's the difference here. And let me give you a personal example. I thought about this week. When I was a senior in high school in Craig, one spring day, early spring, me and a friend decided to skip school. And so we went out to my car, and we didn't really plan it very well. We were like, what are we going to do now? We're like, well, let's get out of Craig. There's nothing here. Let's go to Steamboat Springs, man. So we drove, because there's a lot of pretty girls up here. And we got up here, and there were no pretty girls. They were on school. And so we're like, this is lame. And so we're like, hey, let's go down to Oak Creek, man. And there was less action down there. There was nothing going on there. And so we kind of realized, oh, this is being a big waste and just a long ride. And we're like, let's go back to Craig. And so we decided to take the shortcut from Oak Creek to go over 20 Mile. Many of you know about 20 Mile. It comes out of Hayden. And you know where that turnoff is on this side of Oak Creek. And it goes right up the side of a hill. And so we started going up that hill in my car. And I was going pretty fast. I had a 1974 Mercury Comet and rear-wheel drive. No snow tires, bald tires. I'm a high schooler. We're blowing up that road, and all of a sudden, about halfway up that hill, we hit a patch of ice, and that car starts to tail out. And it is sheer drop-off, right? And all of a sudden, we're leaning towards, we're about to hit the side of the hill, and so I turned really hard and overcorrected, and the car turned back this way, and we were going parallel, and that's not a wide road. We were about to launch off of that cliff. And I did everything I could. I turned, hit the brakes, turned that wheel as hard as I could, and we're just still sliding. And all of a sudden, I mean, right as we get to the edge, the car goes and stops. And I just, you know, that feeling, that rush. And my friend, and there was this horrible odor in the car. We were like, what's going on? No, I'm joking. I'm teasing. we were just stunned. And instantly we looked at each other and went, wow. And then both of us were like, that was a miracle. That was a miracle. Technically it wasn't. We were just lucky. The laws of nature didn't do it. We were lucky. What had happened is that, let me break it down for you. As we were coming back across there, I'd turn those wheels. There was a patch of asphalt that didn't have any ice on it. And it's kind of rough. That's what asphalt is like. And when the rubber that's on my tires hit that asphalt, it caused friction enough to stop the car. There's an explanation for that. And so my point is this, is that we see things and experience things in this world that we kind of go, but like, for example, the formation of a child in a womb, a baby in a womb. I mean, that is wonderful. It's wondrous, right? Or maybe the fact that we're on a planet that's hurtling through space in what scientists call the Goldilocks zone. The fact that we're in this place where it's not too hot and not too cold, and that life can exist on our planet. We're in that little zone. Those things like that, those are wondrous things, but they are not miraculous. Both of them are explainable according to the way the universe works, the laws of nature. Which leads me at last to that first miracle that I want to talk to you about, that everyone kind of believes in, whether they believe in miracles or not. And this is important, because if you can believe this miracle that I'm about to describe, it means that you believe in the possibility of miracles. Believe that they're possible. Okay? And here's the thing. That might be a good step for you. That might be a big step for some of you who don't have faith. That might be a good first step for you. For those of you who had faith and have lost it, this might be a good one to kind of maybe chase down and begin to process. And so it could be a good first step back. But here it is. The most widely accepted miracle in the world, I believe, is the birth of the universe. The beginning of our universe technically constitutes a miracle, and here's why. Follow me if you can. The beginning of the universe, or the singularity that Stephen Hawking talked about, which is that moment right before the birth, right before what some people call the Big Bang, right? That moment when there was no time and there was no universe, there was nothing. In that moment, right before all of that energy unfolded, which is still unfolding, okay, still going, something happened that's outside of or in spite of what you and I call the laws of nature. Something happened that was beyond the laws that run the universe. And I say that because at that point, here's the truth. The laws of nature didn't even exist. Until the birth of the universe, the laws of the nature didn't exist. In fact, the birth of the laws of nature coincide with the birth of the universe. They happen at the same time. So it's not an exaggeration to say that because of the birth of the universe happened outside of the laws of nature, that was actually what we could call a supranatural event. Supernatural. Now that's the best word we can put to it. Supra means above and beyond. It's above and beyond. The birth of the universe was it was above and beyond the laws of nature as we know them. Which, according to our definition that we talked about a moment ago, means that the birth of our universe was technically a miracle, right? It was what we could call a supernatural event. There was something above and beyond what we know and can identify happening. Now, don't jump ahead. I'm not saying that it was God that made that. I'm just saying this. Listen, here, put it this way. Science tells us, this is a verifiable scientific fact. Science tells us that everything that has a beginning has a cause. Everything that has a beginning has a cause. Science says that. And we know that the universe and the laws of nature both have a beginning. No one denies that. And since they both have a beginning, they both have a cause. The question is what is the cause? What caused that to happen? Well, most people in the world believe that God did it, right? But not all, and some don't. And here's what's fascinating. Those who don't believe that God was the cause of the universe, they either believe two things. They either believe that A, the universe caused the universe, and no one believes that. That doesn't make any sense. A thing cannot cause itself. That's, again, science. It cannot make itself happen. Or a better explanation that many people have, including many atheists, they believe B, that nothing caused the universe. There was no thing or person that caused it. And so here's the truth, is in either one of those situations, it would require the laws of the universe to be suspended for those to happen, which by our definition constitutes that a miracle technically happened. In other words, everyone, regardless of how they believed that the universe came into existence, believed that a miracle of some sort happened. If God made it, then that's a miracle. And if nothing made it, it's kind of a bigger miracle, amen? All right, now look, I'm not trying to play gotcha. I'm just trying to illustrate that we all pretty much believe miracles are possible, because we all kind of believe in maybe accidentally, that one happened, right? We all believe that the beginning of the universe required something supernatural to cause it to happen. Now, again, Christians believe it was God that did that. And the reason we believe that is because the book of Genesis tells us that. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, it says this: in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And unfortunately, Genesis has gotten a little twisted by our culture. And so I really want to clarify something that maybe you've never thought about. Here it is. The point of the Genesis account of creation, the reason we are given the Genesis account of creation, is not to tell us how God made the heavens and the earth. That's not the point. The point of the Genesis account is to tell us that God created the heavens and the earth. That's the point. The point was to let the world know that God, or more specifically Yahweh, the God of the Jews and the God of Christians, actually created the universe, that he did it. Not the many pagan gods that are out there that pagans believed created the universe. The Jews would say, no. The world wasn't created by a bunch of different gods whose bodies kind of split apart, and one became the ocean, and one became land, and one became the sun, and one became the moon. That's not how it happened. There is one God, and he is the causer of the universe. He is the beginner of the universe, right? He's the one who has no beginning and no end. He was there before there was a universe, and he created it, and God in and of himself created the heavens and earth. That's the point of the Genesis account. It's not about how he did it, and yet many Christians, we do this. We like to get in and dig in deep, and we try to get in between some of those words and the little spaces in there, and we're trying to figure out, how did God create the universe? And God looks at us, and he's like, I can't even begin to explain to you how I did it. I mean, your brains are so small. You don't even use 10% of your brains. I mean, seriously, you don't even know how to use your cell phone. You can't. Some of you haven't figured out how to download an app. And you want me to explain to you how I created something out of nothing? It will take some time. In fact, I'll tell you how I did it when we have more time. When we get to eternity, maybe that'll be enough. Amen? So that's how it is. My point is that Christians, get this, we take the Genesis account seriously because it tells us that God created the universe. He created it from nothing, and it was a miracle. And so that's the first miracle. Now, the second one that I want to show you, the second miracle that you need to believe in order to believe to be a Christian, I have to go back to something that they teach in seminary. So this is going to sound academic, but man, hang with me. This is good. There's this thing called the classic or classical apologetic method. I don't know. The word apologetics you may not understand. That means the defense of, or the ability to make a case for. And so all seminary students need to go through and be able to make a case for and be able to defend their faith with rationale thought. And so students will take a class like this, and it'll take the whole semester to learn this to what I'm going to give about 6 minutes to. So believe me, this is going to be small. But the reason I'm showing this, don't miss this, is so that you can see the context for why this second miracle is so important. And perhaps, secondly, maybe you'll decide to believe it. because there's been a lot of thought into this. Pretty amazing, and that it happened. And so the classic apologetic method contains 5 statements that Christians throughout the centuries have kind of pared down that make up the foundation of the entire Christian faith. That these are kind of the things that Christianity has thought on and can sustain and be able to, you can talk to someone about what you believe, all right? And in these 5 statements, we see the second miracle, but let's look at the first 2. The first we already talked about. Number 1, they would make the statement that God exists. There is a God, which means that miracles are possible, right? Students would take several weeks in this class, and they would discuss and look at all the arguments for the existence of God. Then they would take about a week, and they would talk about how this. If God created nature, that means that he is above and beyond nature. Therefore, he has the ability to manipulate nature and control nature. Therefore, miracles are possible. So that's rational thought. But the third statement they make is kind of a hard right turn, and it comes out of nowhere, but it's powerful. It's this. The Gospels, they would say, are a reliable account of actual events. That when we read the Gospels, we are reading history as we define it. And students would spend several weeks verifying the historical accuracy of these eyewitness accounts of Jesus' life. And they would go out and they'd compare all the other contemporary historical documents of the time of who was ruling and what was happening and what was going on in this area. And they would compare that to what we get in the Gospels. And they would validate that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, what they wrote was historically accurate. And that, of course, is super important. And here's why. Because all 4 of those folks testified that Jesus was crucified. Jesus of Nazareth was crucified, and that he was resurrected from the dead. They all make that statement, 4 different eyewitness accounts. And that leads us to the second miracle that we need to believe in order to be a Christian. And that's number 4, that Jesus Christ rose from the dead. Yeah, this is the big one. That's the biggest one. That is the biggie. As the Apostle Paul said, that without the resurrection, we have no faith. If there's no resurrection, we're wasting our time. Without the resurrection, we have no hope. So let's go home. And why did he say that? Well, here's why. Because, don't miss this, the resurrection of Jesus, don't miss this, proved number 5, that Jesus was who he said he was. And what he said can be trusted. Now, let me make that clear. Because Jesus came back from the dead, it validated some of the crazy things that he said. Like he said things like, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. I and the Father are one. He was basically saying, I am God in a bod. I'm the creator of the universe right here in front of you. Now, you don't say that unless you're crazy, unless you have a death wish, especially in that culture, or it might be true. And no, when he said it, there was like, yeah, good for you, buddy. But when he came back from the dead, all of a sudden it's like, whoa, maybe, right? And so it validated that Jesus was who he said he was, and what he said can be trusted. I mean, if someone can predict their death and the fact that they're coming back from the dead, you know what? And then pull it off. I've always said this. We need to probably lean into what they say. We need to go, what? Tell me more. What am I missing here? And so Jesus predicted his death and resurrection, which means what he said about himself and what he said about God and what he said about life, we can probably put some trust in it because no one's done that. No one pulled that off. And that's why we here talk all about the resurrection so often. Because it is huge. It is the foundation of our faith. It is the crux of our faith. Everything hinges on it. I mean, think about it. That is the event. The resurrection of Jesus is the event that caused the movement, that launched the movement, that turned the world upside down. The world has never been the same since that time, since Jesus. What year is it? 2024, 2024 years ago, this person existed. And yeah, a lot of people existed. What was so cool about him? They claimed that he came back from the dead. It changed the world. Rome, who nailed Jesus to the cross 200 years later, said, hey, we think Jesus is God. Everybody needs to become Christian. Now, what caused that? That resurrection, that movement, turned the world upside down, and that is the event that birthed the church, the movement, and the church is the one that eventually put the Bible together. About 400 years later, they collected these documents, put it together, and I would just suggest to you that if there was no resurrection, there's no Bible, right? Because if there's no resurrection, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John would have never wrote about Jesus. They would have never wrote about it. Jesus would have been just another one of 100 Messiah wannabes that raised up during that time and that Rome ended up killing. And when he died, that would be the end of the story. But the resurrection makes his story worth telling, right? Because it changes everything. Death, for example, if that's true, no longer has any hold on us. It no longer has ultimate authority over us. Death is not the end. If that's true. If that's true, there's more to this life than you and I can see. It's huge. Huge. And one more little point on this, and then I'll move on. And that is this, is if Jesus was who he said he was, and what he said can be trusted, then what Jesus said about the law and the prophets can be trusted too. Now, the law and the prophets, that is what Jews called, what we call the Old Testament. They didn't call it the Old Testament. It wasn't old to them. That was their scriptures. That was their Bible. We call it the Old Testament because we got a new one, and that is God added to it with the new covenant with Jesus, right? But if Jesus can be trusted, if God raised him from the dead, Jesus can be trusted. And what Jesus said about the law and the prophets, the Old Testament, can also be trusted. And so my point here is that even though the Old Testament is at the front of our Bibles, it is at the back of our apologetics. And so let me update our list. Number 5 at the bottom. What Jesus said about the Hebrew Scriptures can be trusted. Because Jesus rose from the dead, you and I can trust what Jesus said about the Hebrew Scriptures are trustworthy. And my point here, I'm just making a small point, and that is that the reason Christians take the Old Testament seriously, we believe those stories and those miracles, isn't because the Old Testament got wrapped up in leather binding and with some cardboard in there and became part of our Bible and we included it with the New Testament. No, it's because the reason we take the Old Testament seriously is because Jesus took the Old Testament seriously. He believed those things. He verified. He believed that Genesis 1:1 was true, that that's how it happened. And so, and this is a fact of history. I don't know if you ever thought about it. This is crazy. But before Jesus showed up on the scene, Gentiles, non-Jewish people, had no interest and almost no access to the Jewish scriptures. They didn't care. The Jews, to them, back before Jesus showed up, Jews were just weird. Jews had a weird religion. They had a weird diet. They wore weird clothes. They had a weird little surgery. Snip, snip. That's funny. I don't care who you are. None of the Gentiles want anything to do with it. They basically avoided Jews. And then, this is history, look it up. Suddenly, in the middle of the first century, Gentiles from all over the world began to be interested in the Jewish scriptures. They were fascinated. They were like, oh my gosh, they were reading this. And they're like, look at all these promises and these prophecies that were made hundreds of years ago about the coming Messiah and what he would do and what he would say. They're like, oh my gosh, this says that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. Where was Jesus born? He was born in Bethlehem. Oh my God, how do they know that? They were freaking out. They're seeing these stories like Abraham taking his son up and Simon. They're like seeing that's a picture of maybe what God would do with Jesus when they're just like, Jesus is all over this thing. And it freaked them out. They're like, this is amazing. Jesus fulfilled these ancient prophecies and God kept his promises to his people and God sent a Messiah to save his people. And more than that, apparently God sent a Messiah to save not just his people, but the whole world, me included. And Gentiles would say crazy things like this. They would say with a straight face, we've been saved by a Jewish carpenter. I mean, it's clear that Jesus is the last king, the final king. And so they were fascinated, and we've been fascinated by the Jewish scriptures. So my point is that that's why we take the whole thing seriously. Now, quick review. Number 1, apologetics. Got to believe God exists. If God exists and he created nature, then miracles are possible. We believe that the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are reliable accounts of actual events that really happened. And we thus believe that Jesus rose from the dead because these are eyewitness people that saw it. Hundreds of people saw this. And finally, then if Jesus rose from the dead, what Jesus said can be trusted. What Jesus said about God can be trusted. What Jesus said about us can be trusted. And what Jesus said about heaven can be trusted. Right? And all of that hinges on just two miracles that happened. Right? Number one, the miracle of the universe. The miracle of the universe is the foundation of our faith in God. The miracle of the universe is proof that God created everything, that He put it together. Somewhere it says that the creation screams that there's a creator. It calls out to our hearts that there's a creator. We sense that, right? And so God gave us creation. He gave us science. He gave us the ability to understand and define and look at and observe the laws of nature, right? And recognize the order that He has put into our world. I mean, DNA, we've recently discovered that DNA is just code, that there's intelligence at the smallest pieces of this thing. That's crazy. And He gave us, here's the other thing, God gave us curious minds that would want to seek the truth, and more importantly, that perhaps we might want to seek our Creator. And secondly, the second miracle is the miracle of resurrection, which is the foundation of our faith in Jesus. And that means this, that if God raised Jesus from the dead, then we can trust that what Jesus said about our own life and even our own death is true. And get this, because God raised Jesus from the dead, or more, let me go back a step, and because God allowed Jesus to die and then raised Him from the dead, well, that can help you and I realize that maybe some things in this world aren't going to go our way. And maybe some of our prayers aren't going to get answered the way we want, when we want, how we want. I mean, if Jesus had to go through that, right? I mean, the thing we realize is that there is sickness in this world. There is disease. There is hatred. There is murder. And there is death. And Jesus experienced all of that firsthand. But His resurrection proves that there is more. There's more, and it proves that those things are not the end of the story, that there is something more, that there's something better, and maybe so much better that you and I can't even with our little pea-picking brains begin to imagine how much better. And all we have to do is to trust Jesus, and we get to experience that in our own lives. That's pretty amazing. Amen? And that's pretty cool to me. And so I want to encourage you, wherever you are on this continuum, come back this next week. We're going to dig into this, and it's going to be hopefully encouraging and inspiring and challenging to you. But I want to end by asking a variation of the question that I asked at the very beginning today. At the beginning, I asked if anyone here ever in their life needed a miracle before. Almost everybody raised their hand. Yeah. I got a better question. In fact, can I just ask you to stand here as we close? Would you just stand with me? Yeah. Just as a little survey. I asked earlier if anyone had ever needed a miracle before, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask if anybody needed a miracle now. Last service, have a gentleman who's been coming to the church the last month and a half, and he's been given a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer, stage 5. He's told time is ticking. He's looking for a miracle. But maybe yours isn't as dramatic. Or maybe you got someone in your life that you love and you're worried about that's sick. You have a need and you need God to come through in some way. I just want to give you an opportunity to respond to that same question and just look and see what we have here. Is there anybody here this morning that in your mind you're looking for or hoping for a miracle? Maybe you've been waiting for a miracle for a long time. Would you raise your hand? Would you be so bold? Hold your hands up if you would, please. I want the rest of you to look around real quick at these people with their hands raised. Notice someone near you. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for your faith. We're told that God answers prayer. we know that he doesn't always do it the way we want. But we're told that we should pray, that there's something that's in that. And so I want to pray for you. I want to give you an opportunity to pray for that miracle. And some of you are like, man, darn it, I knew you were going to trick me. Because I've been waiting on this for so long, I don't think it's going to happen. You don't know. We believe in a God who exists and that miracles are possible. And we should take that position and trust in that. And that maybe if it feels like it's been too long, maybe it's just the right time. We don't know. But I don't want you to miss that. And I want to give you an opportunity to respond to it. At the end of all of our services, I normally invite people to come down and pray with me or a couple of our people, but there's so many of you. I want to ask, would those of you that saw someone next to you raise your hand? Would some of you be so bold to maybe go, hey, I'll pray with you? You're like, oh, I can't pray out loud. Sure you can. And you don't have to tell the details. Just say, hey, I'm praying for this, or I'm looking for this, or I need this. But I just have a feeling that God has something for somebody in here. And let's step into that. Would that be okay? Would you all be cool praying with someone? Some of you are like, no, I am out of here as soon as you dismiss. That's okay. You don't have to, but someone will. But if you don't have someone, if you raise your hand and you want to pray and no one comes to you, it's not because they don't like you. We're shy. I don't know. But I'll be down here. Charlie will be down here. We'd love to pray with you as well. Okay? See you guys next week. Hope you come back. God bless.